Hey guys, how you doing today? I'm about to step out in faith, so go with me on this journey.
I will show you crazy. I'm a maniac. No more final warning. I'm not holding back. I ain't going nowhere. Let the roof cave in. About to blow up something. Here goes nothing. Watch me hit the
That actually wasn't that bad. I think it was much easier to do that than the story we're going to talk about tonight. So, if you haven't figured out what we're talking about yet, I came out here on the ice to kind of talk about a story where someone in the Bible walks on the water. And I thought this was relevant because in a sense I'm walking on water right now. And, you know, it took a little bit of faith to come out here, but not that much because I know I'm not going to fall through, and if I do, there's only dirt below me. It's not like this is a lake or anything like that. But the story we're going to talk about tonight involves someone who actually walked on water, not walking on ice. So, you guys, I want you to go ahead and open your Bibles to Matthew chapter 14, verse 22. And while you're turning to Matthew 14, 22, I'm going to pretend to skate like I'm in the Olympics. If you found your Bible verse, you can find this in music. We're going to go out in the middle so it feels like we're really brave right now. I really hope I don't fall, but I'm thinking all of you right now are hoping I do. Okay, Matthew chapter 14, verse 22. Here's what it says. Immediately after this, Jesus insisted that his disciples get back into the boat and cross to the other side of the lake, while he sent the people home. After sending them home, he went up into the hills by himself to pray. Night fell while he was there alone. Meanwhile, the disciples were in trouble far away from land, for a strong wind had risen, and they were fighting heavy waves. About 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them, walking on the water. And when the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were terrified. In their fear, they cried out, "It's a ghost!" But Jesus spoke to them at once. "Don't be afraid," he said. "Take courage, I am here." Then Peter called to him, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you walking on the water." "Yes, come," Jesus said. So Peter went to the side of the boat and walked on the water towards Jesus. But when he saw the strong wind and the waves, he was terrified and began to sink. "Save me, Lord," he shouted, and Jesus immediately reached out and grabbed him. "You have so little faith," Jesus said. "Why did you doubt me?" And when they climbed back into the boat, the wind stopped, and then the disciples worshipped him. "You really are the Son of God," they exclaimed. So this is one of my favorite stories in the Bible. This is one of those stories you hear as a child about Jesus walking on the water to the disciples. Another one of the Gospels says the disciples are about 3 or 4 miles out into the sea, out into this lake, and Jesus comes walking in the middle of the night on the water, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, it's a ghost. Who is this thing? What is this thing walking on the water towards us in the middle of a storm?" And then they see that it's Jesus. I don't know how I would respond because I've never seen someone walk on the water. But I think I would be kind of scared, kind of freaked out a little. But they see it's Jesus. And then Peter, who is so interesting, Peter does so many things in the Bible. He's so interesting because he's the one that says, "Well, if it's you, ask me to come out on to the water, to walk on the water." And so Jesus says, "Come on out," and Peter does it. Now, I mean, it takes a little bit of faith, like I said, to walk out on ice. Especially if you were out like one of those ice fishermen, things like that. But it doesn't take a lot of faith to walk on this. But I can't imagine what Peter was thinking, because he stepped out onto this water in the middle of a storm, in the middle of a lake, and he walks on the water. And it's going well. He's looking at Jesus. Things are going well. He's treading on the water, probably like, what the heck? I've never done this before. And then he starts thinking about his surroundings. He thinks about the storm. He thinks about all that's going on. And he immediately begins to sink. He took his eyes off Jesus, begins to sink, and Jesus has to reach down and save him. And they get back into the boat. And then the storm stops, and they all worship Jesus. So there's a few things I want us to take away from this lesson. And here's the point of the lesson tonight. It's about having faith. Not faith in God, but faith to step out. Faith to do things that he's called us to do, right? When we think about Jesus, when we think about God, and we give our lives to him, there's an aspect of faith there. We've given our lives over to him. We believe that he is who he says he is, and we believe that the Bible's true, and so we put our faith in him. But then there's another aspect of faith that's trusting in what he says and then stepping out and doing what he's called us to do. And so there's a few things that I think are important that I want to encourage you and challenge you with tonight. The first is this, is that, sometimes stepping out in faith can be scary. Sometimes stepping out and trusting God can be scary. But what we see is that Jesus, he calms our fears and he encourages us to step out. He says, come out of the boat. Come on out. It's okay. Step out. And he encourages us and calms our fears. Because you know what? I don't expect any of you to walk on water. I don't expect any of you to do things like that. But I do think that part of having faith, part of doing what God's called us to do is little things. It's, standing up for your friends. It's talking to someone about Jesus. It's praying for someone. It's loving someone who you normally wouldn't love. It's those little acts of faith that Jesus says he encourages us to do, and then as we do them, he comforts us and strengthens us to keep doing those. But in our own strength, sometimes it can be hard to do that. It can be intimidating. We feel the pressure from other people, and we say, I don't know. I'm gonna back up. I don't know if I want to stand up. I don't know if I want to let people know what I believe. Things like that. But when we keep our eyes on Jesus, when we keep our eyes on him and say, Jesus, man, you've loved me and you've called me to do this. I'm going to keep my eyes on you and I'm going to step out like Peter did on the water. He'll give us the strength to do that. But the moment we take our eyes off him, the moment we begin to think about our surroundings, the moment we begin to think about what other people might think, the moment we begin to think, well, what's going to be the consequence of this? What's going to happen if I pray for this person? If I go to a Bible study at my school, how is that going to affect my image? How are people going to take that? That's when we're going to begin to sink. So we have to take our eyes off the storm around us and keep our eyes on Jesus. And there's this really cool thing that when we step out in faith, when we put our eyes on Jesus, and then when we do those things, our faith is built up to encourage us to step out more. It's like a snowball effect. You roll it down the hill. The further it rolls, the bigger it gets. We step out in faith in the little things. He's going to give us the strength and the encouragement, and we're going to be built up to do the bigger things, to say, okay, what's God calling me to do with my life? Maybe he's calling me to be a missionary, to step out in faith, to leave what I know behind and to go overseas and live in a third world country. Who knows? But it's the faith starts with the little things and grows so that we're able to do the big things that he called us to do. And as we do these things, as we step out in faith, as we see God work, as we see him being faithful, that leads us all the more to worship him. To say, God, you're amazing. You asked me to step out, and I did. And hypothetically, I walked on the water. And it causes us to say, God, you're good. Wow. And it causes us to worship him. So it builds. It builds, guys, as we step out in faith in the little things. We're encouraged. We keep our eyes on Jesus. It helps us step out more, and the more and more we do that, the more and more faith we get, and the more and more we begin to worship God for who he is, because we see how good he is as we're being faithful to what He's called us to do. So they all work together. So I guess what I'm saying in all of this is each day we have the opportunity to take little steps of faith. Each day we have the opportunity to say, okay, God, where can I step out in faith today? And then we have the opportunity to either do it or to stay in the boat. And you think of the other disciples who watched Peter walk on the water. They watched him step out, they watched him walk, and then they watched him sink. But how many of them were like, man, I wish I would have taken that opportunity to walk on the water. I wish I would have stepped out of the boat just like Peter did. And even if I would have sunk, how cool would it have been just to take a few steps on the water? Because guys, when God presents opportunities for us to be faithful, when He presents these chances for us to step out in small ways, sometimes when we don't do them, we regret them. We see an opportunity to go on a mission trip, and we say, I'm a little scared. I don't know. And we say, I can't do it. I'm not going to step out. And then you hear these great stories of what happened on the mission trip. And you're like, man, I wish I would have stepped out and gone on the mission trip. I wish I would have done that thing, or whatever. And so in each of our lives, we have little things we can do. Things I said earlier: praying for someone, showing love to someone. There are opportunities daily to step out in faith. And so I want you guys to start taking little steps. You don't need to jump in with both feet, but just take the little steps. And as you take the little steps, you'll take the big steps. If I started now putting on ice skates, I would most definitely fall. But if I put them on and began practicing a little bit with ice skates, soon I would get the hang of it. Soon I would be skating backwards. Soon I would be spinning and leaping if I put enough effort. And that's how it is with faith. We start small and it grows big. So that's my encouragement to you guys today. And throughout this week, to think about it and look for these opportunities to step out of faith and to do the things that God's called us to do.